How much does it really cost to live in Venice, Florida? Most people think that they know the answer to this question. They look at the price of the home and that's where they stop. But after helping a lot of people relocate here, I've learned something, and that is that just because two homes cost the exact same amount and they look the same on paper, they do not cost the same to own them. So in fact, one house could easily cost you several $100s more every single month than another. Today, I'm going to show you the cost that people expect, what catches them by surprise, and how looking beyond the purchase price can save you thousands of dollars over the life of owning your home. By the way, if we haven't met, I'm Justin Bowerice. I was born and raised right here in Venice. I'm an Army veteran, a girl dad of 3 young ladies, and I help people relocate to Florida pretty regularly. So one thing that you will notice about this channel is that I'm not trying to convince you to move here. People are coming here regardless, no matter what. They don't need my help to convince them. So my job is to help you make a smart decision. If Venice is the right fit, great. If it isn't, I'd rather you figure that out before you buy a house here. All right, so let's use a simple example. Imagine you are looking at 2 homes. They're both listed at $500,000. The same number of bedrooms, about the same size. Most people assume they'll cost about the same to own, but in reality, they could be hundreds of dollars apart every single month. So let's break down why. All right, so the housing market here in Venice has changed quite a bit over the last couple of years. For a while, sellers had a great deal of leverage. Inventory was tight, prices climbed quickly. Today, buyers have a lot more negotiating power. Homes are still selling, but they're selling because they're priced correctly. Right now, the median single family home in Venice is right around $550,000. On the island of Venice, it's closer to $750,000. But here's something I tell almost every single buyer. The purchase price gets you in the front door. The monthly ownership cost determines whether you'll actually enjoy living there. All right, let's talk about insurance. Insurance is probably the biggest surprise for people that are moving to Florida. Because of hurricanes and tropical storms, your insurance premiums are generally higher than buyers are anticipating. Here's the part that surprises people. Insurance is not based on not only where the house is, but on the house itself. So a newer home built to today's hurricane standards might cost around $2,000 to $4,000 a year to insure. An older home could easily be $4,000 to $8,000 or more. I recently had buyers comparing 2 homes, same price, same general area. They were similar in size. Then the insurance quotes came back, and one was almost twice as much as the other. It was things like the roof, impact windows, wind mitigation features, and the age of the home. So that one insurance quote completely changed which house made the most financial sense for these particular buyers. And that's why I always recommend getting insurance quotes during the inspection period. Do not wait till the end where you are required to have a binding agreement. Go ahead and get that done. You do not want surprises at the end of your transaction, I promise. It only takes a few phone calls and it could save you thousands of dollars over the years. Be proactive with it. All right, so speaking of insurance, we're gonna move on to flood insurance, which is like the dreaded thing for every single person that moves here. They just assume their home is gonna flood. So here's another misconception that I hear all the time. Every home in Venice requires flood insurance. That is simply not true. There are plenty of homes throughout Venice that aren't located in the FEMA flood zones, which require flood insurance. So at the same time, 2 homes just a few streets apart can have completely different flood requirements because of elevation. Never assume, always verify. Reviewing flood maps is something that I do every single time with every single relocation buyer, without a doubt. All right, so let's talk about property taxes. Property taxes and CDD fees. You may have the CDDs, that's a community development district. You're gonna get a lot of places like Welland Park. So property taxes can be a nice surprise for a lot of buyers that are moving down from New Jersey, New York. The property taxes here are far less and they appreciate that. So a rough rule of thumb is 1 to 1.5% of the assessed value of the home, not the purchase price. So every property is different, but if you go 1 to 1.5%, that's a really quick way to be able to figure out what your property taxes are going to be. All right, so if this is going to be your primary residence, Florida's homestead exemption can reduce your taxable value and help limit future increases. So if this is your primary residence, you're staying here, you 100% want to file for Florida's homestead exemption. All right, so like I mentioned before, a lot of buyers have never heard of CDD fees, the Community Development District fees, and these get worked directly into your taxes. So it's a way that newer communities, they pay for things like roads, utilities, lakes, landscaping, and other infrastructure within the area of the new construction area. All right, the important thing is this. CDD fees are often included as part of your annual property tax bill, which I think I mentioned already. So if you're comparing a home in Welland Park to a home in South Venice, they are going to be dramatically different. So don't just compare the purchase price, compare your total tax bill. So like I said, two similarly priced homes can be very different when it comes to annual ownership costs. All right, so now we're gonna move on to HOA fees if you potentially have them. So one mistake I see buyers make is focusing only on monthly HOA fees. Instead, ask yourself, what am I getting for the value for that money? Some communities include things like your lawn maintenance, your irrigation, cable, internet, fitness centers, pools, pickleball, walking trails, and a full calendar of community events which people absolutely love. I've actually seen neighborhoods with higher HOA fees that ended up costing less overall than communities with a much lower HOA fee. Again, look at the total monthly ownership cost, not just one line item. All right, next we're going to be moving on to your utilities. Utilities are another expense that people ask me about all the time. Yes, your air conditioner is going to be working almost all the time for a solid 10 months out of the year. All right, it's going to work much harder than it does in Michigan or Pennsylvania. But your electric bill isn't just determined by the weather, it also is determined by the house. Older windows, older insulation, an aging HVAC system. All of those things can make a big difference every single month in your utility bill. All right, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this video is that I don't want you to buy based on purchase price. Buy based on your total monthly costs. Sometimes the cheaper house ends up costing you more every single month. All right, so sometimes the more expensive house can actually save you money. So when you look at the complete financial picture, you must always make a better financial decision. If you're thinking about relocating to Venice or anywhere here along Florida's Gulf Coast, I'd be happy to help you compare more than just houses. We'll look at neighborhoods, we'll look at HOA fees, taxes, insurance, all the things that you have concerns with. And if you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. Every single week, I give honest local content to help people make a better, more informed decision before they move here to Southwest Florida. Thank you so much for hanging in there till the end. And as always, God bless.